Good day again, everyone. We're here on a follow-up in creating a website, and here we'll be discussing CSS formatting. Before we proceed on different CSS formatting properties, let's look on CSS colors. In this way, you will be able to appropriately put color values on any CSS properties it will require you to put it onto. There are at least three ways you can choose from to put the same color. One is by its color name, another is hexadecimal values, and RGB spelled out as red, green, and blue. Here's a table for basic colors used on the web. Let's push this quite a bit so we can draw some examples. So for a heading one, we can change its font color to yellow, or using its hex value, RGB value, and even adjust its opacity by using RGBA value and setting this example to 50% opacity. Putting a border color on a paragraph, again, we can use a color value by its color name, hex value, RGB value, and with an adjusted opacity of 60%. Last example is for changing the background color of an emphasized HTML element. We can use a color name, hex value, RGB value, and RGBA for adjusted opacity, this time at 70%. For numerical values, there are CSS measurement units that we need to understand. There are absolute units in which we define exact or definite length of measurement, just by putting the desired unit right after a numerical value. Examples would be English measurement unit like inches, and standard metric units like centimeters and millimeters. The popular unit would be the screen pixel units. For relative units, measurement would be based on another element's length. Examples would be EM, that is relative to current font size, and percentage relative to its enclosing element. In formatting HTML elements, the CSS background properties would be too important to miss out. There are a number of style properties we can list. One would be the background color, which obviously set the color of the element's background. Values are related to CSS colors, which could be IX value, among other color representation we've tackled just a while ago. Another would be a background image, in which the value is the location path of the image you'll be using as a background. Another is the background repeat, in which the value will dictate how the background image will either be repeated horizontally, vertically, or on both direction. And background attachment as to whether you like your image to scroll with the rest of the page or just be fixed while your web page is on scroll. Good thing is that there is a shorthand for these background properties. You just have to put the background on any HTML element you like to modify their background, and then just put the values right after the other with only one space in between them, just like the color, the image's location path, how would you like to repeat your image, and if you intend to get it fixed on the page or scroll with your web page. Now for CSS border properties. One would be the border width, which sets how thick the border will be. Another would be a border style, which sets what your border will look like, from a basic solid line to something fancier like doubling the border line or making it dashed. Next is the border color. Again, values here are CSS colors, which you already know have different forms you can put in. And in our case here, we use the RGB form. And yes, it is a good thing that there is a shorthand for these border properties too. You just have to put the border on any element you like to modify the border, and then just put the values right after the other with only one space in between them, just like the width, the border style, which you have to take note to be a required value when using this shorthand, and of course color. Well, There are still other awesome border properties that we have to enlist, though unfortunately we cannot include it here with our shorthand. One would be the border radius, which technically defines how curved the corners our axis border can get. So this is where we left off the last time we discussed CSS types and rules. But before we modify this one, let's try to run it on a browser and see what we have done so far on this HTML web page. So in here, we just highlighted the parts or elements of the web page where we can actually demonstrate how the CSS rules influence the changes we want them to take effect. Currently, what we used here is an internal or embedded CSS. Now, for our first activity, we'll be converting this one to an external CSS. So let's try to create a style.css file. We're going to save it inside a folder and name it CSS. Then let's move all the CSS codes from here to our newly created file. We have to put a link here inside the head tag in order for us to locate our style.css file. Save. Then let's go back to Chrome. Nothing should be changed since we just converted our CSS to an external type. However, we've got to remove all our CSS codes from here because we're about to use CSS formatting here instead. Again, here's our page without CSS codes. So from what we've discussed on our slides a while ago about CSS background and border properties, let's put a background here first on our HTML's body. We'll put a background color value, the background image file location, the background repeat, and then the attachment value as fixed. We'll also add another background property here, which can't be included with the shorthand, the background size. Let's make it both 15px for the height and width, So when it repeatedly displays both horizontally and vertically, will produce a nice subtle diagonal stripe bluish pattern as our background. Next, let's make use of the CSS border shorthand. Let's put a border for all heading 2 and for both ordered and unordered lists. So again, just like our background shorthand, let's put the border property values side by side with a single space in between them. This one's for the border width, the border style, and then the border color. Plus another border property which cannot be included with the shorthand, the border radius. On our fresh, we got round cornered light blue borders for these two headings and for both our ordered and unordered lists. Now for CSS font properties. One would be the font style, which sets if your font will just be normally typed or in italics. Another would be a font variant, which sets if your font will be in small caps or not. Next is font weight, which determines how thick your font will be. Another is font size, which obviously sets the size of the font. And another that is mostly used is the font family, which specifies the font's face. You can set both a specific font family and a generic family at the same time by just putting a comma between them. In our case here, Helvetica is the font specified font, while the sans serif is the generic font family. Again, there is also shorthand for font properties. We just have to put font on any HTML element we'd like to modify their font, and then just put the values right after the other with only one space in between them, just like the font style, the font variant, font weight, the font size, and the font family. Now for CSS text properties. There are a lot of text properties. One very popular and we're familiar with is the color, of course. Another is the text align, which deals with horizontal alignment, while the vertical align is responsible for the vertical alignment. The direction property lets you either position the text from left to right or right to left. Another common property would be the text transform, which lets you convert your text to all caps or just capitalized words. Text indent lets you define indentions. Letter spacing allows you to give more room in between characters, while word spacing, of course, sets space in between words. Line height sets the space between lines of text, and white space sets how the white space inside an element is handled, having values like normal, free, or no wrap. Now for CSS link states. These are actually the different states of HTML hyperlinks. One would be the A link, which is the initial state or unvisited hyperlinks. Second would be the visited state. Third is hover, that is when the hyperlink is hovered upon by a mouse. And fourth, the active state, which is the event when the hyperlink is actually clicked. On our second activity, we'll use the CSS font shorthand. On our HTML body, let's put font. First, let's have our font size. Then our font family, which is Helvetica, and our generic font family, the sans serif. On any emphasized HTML element, EM will change its font style to italic and font weight to bold. On our heading 1, let's change its font variant to small caps. Save. Now we can see the changes and our fonts kind of look slicker. Now let's get into CSS text properties. Like what we've discussed, there's a lot on the list and we'll try to use a few. So first, let's go to our heading 2. And change its color to white. And to have contrast, we'll turn its background a bit darker. Then we'll use text transform to turn it to uppercase. Second, let's group select our heading 1 and 2 and apply text align property to center. Third, let's make some distinction on our paragraphs by having it indented. Then fourth, we'll make use of the line height property for our list items. Let's set it to 1.5 EM. This means that we intend to make the text here 50% more taller than our paragraph text to create a mid-sized text effect in between our paragraphs and our headings. Now we're getting some more distinctions on our design. Last changes that we're going to put here would be on CSS link states. We'll just try to have our feet wet here by just changing link and the hover state. So for our link, we'll remove the underline by setting the text decoration to none. Then on mouse hover, we'll make the text color change to white. And for now, let's settle for the same contrast we applied to our headings too. Then there we have it. We got rid of the underline for our hyperlink. And on hover, we have the contrast effect that's just the same for now with our headings. So that's it for the week. I hope you've learned a lot. Have a good day and see you next week.